Good morning. It's so wonderful to see such a packed house this morning. Suzanne, it's all for you. It is a joy to share this day with Suzanne, and it's a paradox for me because we're in the midst of a book study called The Untethered Soul. Some of us have been joining during the week in some home study groups. The idea of the untethered soul is the journey beyond yourself. And there's no greater way to have the experience of journeying beyond ourselves than when we look at how we serve each other, how we love each other, how we work together. And yet our author this week invites us in the last few chapters of the book to take a look at some of the things that we just as human beings carry within ourselves. One of the things that we've talked over the last few weeks is that there are these thorns or these little triggers that as we grow on our spiritual path, we begin to notice. I think I've shared before that there's nothing like the relationship with the people that we live with or the people that we work with to help discover where those places of tenderness lie. And I really do consciously use the word tenderness instead of the word thorn. Because for me, the tenderness is that there's an awareness that rises to our humanity. We talk a lot about our divinity. That part of us is a spiritual. In Unity, sometimes we say we're spiritual beings having a spiritual and human experience. Those are all lovely platitudes. Ultimately, we're all on a journey to remembering more of who we truly are. Can I get an amen? Amen? We're on a journey to remember who we truly are, that divine light. And in the midst of that journey, we know that each of us, while we were born and we celebrate the birth of babies and of young children as they begin to grow, that each and every one of us is headed on a path. And it is a path to death. Now, I got to tell you, when I realized we were honoring Suzanne for retiring or letting go of something, and the chapter I'm supposed to talk about is contemplating death, I had an argument with Spirit. And yet, as human beings, we have beginnings and endings all the time, right? This is what our author says about a conversation of death. You must not be afraid to discuss death. Don't get uptight about it. Instead, let this knowledge help you live every moment of your life fully, because every moment matters. That's what he's inviting us into, is an awareness that every moment matters. And so I ran across this image about a week ago. And it's an image, it's a painting, and I absolutely love it because the image of these faces out the side with these cords going to our brain remind me of all the different chattering voices that we have in our head. And I don't know about you, but I know I grew up thinking, there's an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And so many of us have that embedded belief. This image reminded me that while the faces may not look soothing, they're just voices. And the mind hears them, the heart reacts to them, and our stomach digests them. All that we hear in our internal dialogue ends up coming to an expression in our body. And that's okay. That's okay. In Unity, we don't like to talk about death. We even have a word for it. It begins with a T. Does anyone know what it is? Transition. Last Friday, we got a phone call here at the church, and you may have seen it in your bulletin, that a beloved member, Marion Good, made her transition. She passed. And I remembered this week in reflecting on her, the last conversation that we had, she was so excited. Her eyes were alive and dancing, and she was telling me about a checkup she'd had at the doctor. This was probably 6-7 months ago. She said, but you know, I told that doctor, I know where the true power lies. It's right here. And when I first heard her say that, I thought, yeah, the power that lives right here is unaffected by all that happens outside and in our bodies. I have a phrase when I visit folks who are in the hospital, and I've gotten the question, what was I thinking that internalized in my body this illness? I have a real genuine answer, and that is the body just does what the body does. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. Most of us are not Benjamin Button reversing aging, while I have known people in Unity that when they get in and they make a shift in their life experience and the way in which they view the world and the way in which they live out in the world, it does appear that they are regressively growing younger. And yet, as a culture, can we just be okay with the awareness of what we're all about? We're living until we die. One of my favorite Buddhist monks, Thich Nhat Hanh, writes this about the idea of how we can live in an awareness of death with power. He says, many people ask the question, what shall I become after I die? Many people ask, what happens to me when I die? What shall I become after I die? This question seems to be difficult, but it's not difficult at all. Everyone can answer that question if she or he knows how to answer another question. That question is, what happened in this moment while I am still alive? What do I become in this moment that I am still alive? It's a very important question. What happens in the moment when we are very much alive? Do we take the time in our spiritual practice to contemplate not only the meaning of our life, but the way in which we are using the energy in our life? The author of The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer, says, it is not about what we will have accomplished when we get to the end. It's the choices that we make moment by moment of how we will live. It's how we will live with each other, with a loved one. It's how we lived when we're willing to say to someone, you know, I was short with you the other day, I apologize. Or how we live with another and we simply say, you know, I'm sorry. Without the story, without the explanation, without the blame, I'm sorry. We let it go. We create a space within our life where we can have a transitioning moment from that awareness of how our body is internalizing all the personas, all the thoughts, all the ideas of we have to be a certain way, and we bring ourselves into the present moment. Ourselves, not our identity, not our personality, but our divine self. In your bulletin, I hope you have one of these blue flyers, if you'd take it out with me. I'm inspired by an author, Stephen Levine. Some of you may have seen his book or heard his book, A Year to Live. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is that part of our journey of being aware that we are finite human beings is that we open ourselves to love, that we live in a world of forgiving ourselves and others, and that we act on plans that we've put off for years. So here's the exercise for the morning. I invite you to see this list. If I knew I was going to die next week, important things I'm going to do. I invite you to come up with at least 3, one for the mind, one for the body, and one for the spirit. And the mind might be as simple as, if I knew I had a week to live, I'm going to call my long-lost best friend that maybe I haven't had a conversation with or that I had a falling out with. If I only had 1 week, what am I going to do with my mind? What am I going to do with my body? And maybe it's as simple as tell my body every morning as I look in the mirror, I love you. When Ogun, my husband, first met me 16 or 17 years ago, I was pretty new in Unity, and I had the words to a classic Unity song taped to the mirror of my bathroom. And I guess, as a guest in my house, when he went to the bathroom, he thought it'd be funny to make fun of my song lyrics. Because the lyrics were there for me to sing to myself every morning. I love myself the way I am. There's nothing I need to change. He came out and he's like, well, that's an interesting message. You know, he hadn't become hooked in the Unity way yet. What are you willing to say to your body? And what are you willing to say to spirit? That spirit within you. Maybe it's an affirmation. I am a beloved child of God. I am beloved right here in the community of Unity of Gaithersburg. I don't see many of you writing, so I'm thinking that my talking is distracting you, but I really would like for you to do this exercise. At least pick one of these, body, mind, or spirit, and create a statement for yourself. If I knew I was going to die next week, and I can feel that there's a heavy energy over the room, so isn't that interesting? As a culture, we carry a lot of heaviness around the word death. Just take a moment. And yes, I did just get the cue from my husband that I'm running out of time. But in this moment, I invite you to know we make up time. If we knew we had 1 week, so wherever you are in that thought or in that affirmation, if you'll complete it, I have one more thing I need you to do on your blue paper. I want you to cross out the 2 words next week. And somebody read it out for me. Cross out next week and read the top of your paper. Yeah. Sometimes that time seems to be pressure. What if today we chose to know that it's not about how much time we have left? It's a commitment to, if I knew I was going to die, which we all do know, what is it that's important that we do? I was in the midst of a book study of A Year to Live with Stephen Levine, and it was answering this exact question that brought me to this church. If I knew I was going to die, what's important for me to do before I do die? For me, it was to shift an awareness of my thinking about church ministry in that, A, I'm under 40. I'm not today, but then I was under 40. And so a minister can't be under 40. But even bigger for me, because of my history, I'm a 4th-generation minister, so I've seen what ministers do. I've seen the sacrifices ministers' families make. So I had really bought into, I'll be an associate minister and that's good enough. I don't need to do the senior minister thing. And so I lived for 4 years in 2 different positions as an associate minister and had a wonderful experience. Learned a lot, wouldn't give anything, would not trade that experience. And yet, I bet each and every one of us in this room has had an inkling of awareness that when we're in the midst of an experience in life, we're in a role in life, that there comes a point where we're called to let it go and step into what's new. What if we could really think about letting the body and the experience of letting go of this earthly plane and saying yes to our divine spirit's eternal nature? What if that could be a place of peace for each and every one of us? That's what I hold for you. In journeying beyond ourself, we also get to journey beyond this body and this mind. And for many of us, that's why we really love unity. Because unity asks us to look at what's happening spiritually, internally. And then how do we choose to be in the world? Because how we choose to be directly influences what's occurring in the world. Yeah. So we're not here to manipulate or make something happen. I do believe we are here to pay attention in the present moment, not stressed out about the past or anxiously anticipating the future. Here in this present moment. I invite you to take this blue flyer with you home. If you don't have a spiritual practice of meditation or contemplation, I invite you this evening, while the snowflakes begin to collect once again. It might be as simple as if I knew I was going to die next week, I'd move to Florida. We have a running joke in our family. When I lived in North Carolina before we moved here, we lived there for 4 years, and in the 4 years we traveled to my husband's home country of Barbados twice. And it snowed both times. We're leaving for Barbados tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So I guess it's our fault. It really was. It was a church joke. This wonderful woman named Susan, she would come up to me and go, "Just you need to tell me so I can change my calendar when you're traveling to Barbados." Thank you for a little brevity in the moment of a very heavy talk. Take this blue sheet with you. Open your mind and your heart. Because when we're willing to say, I understand that I have a physical body, and it is not eternal. I have a spiritual essence that is eternal. We can find hidden desires that can bring our life to greater fulfillment. And so it is. Amen.